Hi everyone, my name is Estelle Brun. I am a research associate at IRIS, the Institute for International and Strategic Affairs, which is a Paris-based think tank. And I'm also one of the co-founders of GeoSport. Today, I'm here with Arianna Quisquione. Thank you for being here, Arianna. We are going to be talking about athlete activism, and more precisely about women's or gender equality and the environment. Before we start, could you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you so much, Estelle. I can't say your name as beautifully as you can with your accent, but it goes. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Arianna Quisquione. I'm currently a player on Paris Saint-Germain, and I also lead the women's sponsorship team, trying to bring in standalone sponsors for the women's side. And my passion is to bring in sustainable, eco-friendly, and sponsors that can make a difference and align with what our beliefs are here at Paris Saint-Germain.
Great, thank you for being here. So you are an ambassador for Football for Climate, which is a program from the Sports and Sustainability International, aiming at using the power of football to fight climate change. So could you please tell us more about this specific role and about your fight for the environment more generally?
So Football for Climate is, I think we've been around now for maybe a year. I feel like we started discussing this last year. We're still in the infancy stage of it. We're still trying to determine and establish exactly which values we'll be supporting more than others and how we want this relationship and our relationship with the world on a whole to go. But the base values of Football for Climate is to bring in football players and especially football teams and fans to share their experience with how we can make the world a better place from an eco and sustainable way. And so that fans can really start to understand this, because as football teams, there's things we do and we have to be realistic about the situation. There's a ton of stuff we do that is not very good for the environment. Flying private planes is clearly one of the worst things that we can be doing, but that's not really going to change. And we need to be extremely realistic about the situation. Professional teams are not going to stop flying anytime soon. But what we can do and what we can start to help is we can try to offset this carbon footprint. We can try to do things, plant more trees, get rid of carbon footprint in other ways in our stadiums, reuse, recycle, reuse. I always forget, recycle, reuse, reduce. Boom. Okay. And I think too, we need to share with our fans though, and as football players and as clubs, there's a really big voice and fans listen. And sometimes not everybody's aware of what the environment is or what's going on. And most people think it's something exterior outside of them, or it's what those people over there do, rather than explaining that this affects us all. And it can actually start to affect football. There's already been studies showing that some stadiums in England will be underwater by like 2040, 2050, I believe the stats are, but people can go search that on the internet. It's very easy to find. And not to mention, as players, the sun is getting stronger. If we train outside during certain times of the year and certain hours of the day, it's really difficult on us, from dehydration to overwhelming sunburns to just not being able to train at all. And in different countries, it's getting harder and harder to train during the summertime. In the month of August, you really have to figure out where you're going. It can be detrimental. And these are all things that are happening to our planet that as football players, we can start to pay attention to, and we can try to change the dialogue with other people. There's been other things where trying to get fans to carpool to games, less emissions, reusable water bottles at the stadium, us ourselves using reusable water bottles is a big deal. So all of these things is kind of a voice that Football for Climate is trying to put out there and show how players and clubs can make a difference by using their voice in a positive way.
Yeah, I think some of the studies you referred to said that by 2050, 25% of the Premier League football fields might be under risk of being, oh my God, I don't know how to say that, drowned.
Or inundated with water. The water will be too high. It'll be like Venice, basically.
Yeah, and so there's another report that was published very recently by Rapid Alliance Transition that kind of warns against climate change for the practice of sport, while sports itself is a great contributor to climate change. Some studies say that the carbon footprint of international sports is as big as that of Spain or Poland. So indeed, like, it's kind of worrying, and it's great that you guys are trying to address that. So if I understand well, this is an initiative between football players and fans. And I was wondering, what about, for example, PSG as a club, or any, bigger institutions like FIFA? Do you know how those bigger organizations are trying to address the climate change problem, if they are?
Well, PSG in itself has already had massive change within the organization and the structure itself. So within our main headquarters, which is at Billancourt, we have four floors of up to 700 people working there, and they've gotten rid of all plastic cup usage. Now everybody's been given a reusable 10 water bottle that they can fill their their water up in the common areas on each floor, because there's a big water fountain. And there used to be just cups next to it, and people would take a cup, drink some water, and toss it. And now you come and you use that bottle. There's also coffee machines in every area, and now every person has their own ceramic coffee mug that they can clean and reuse, rather than, again, using those plastic cups and throwing them away a lot. The plastic cups have been completely removed. Also, inside our personal offices, all our trash cans have been taken away, and that forces you to get up, go to the common area, and then there's different trash cans in order for you to recycle. Obviously, if you have a trash can right under your desk, you're not going to take the time to get up and throw something away 20 feet away. That sounds super easy, but for most people it wouldn't. And even myself, I'm not perfect. I would probably throw some stuff in the trash if I'm on the phone and super busy. But this forces people to recycle and actually to put it in their head and just kind of start to get in good habits, which I think is a really positive thing. Along with that, at Paris Saint-Germain, there's also the new training center, the Uredu Center, that's being built in Poissy, that is completely sustainable. They're doing some impressive things. The whole structure and the construction has been designed with sustainability in mind. So there's things of recycling the water from the rain. They'll be collecting rain. When they water the grass, the runoff will also be collected and reused and put back in the system for watering the training fields. There will be trees, fruit trees and nuts, and other sort of fruit and produce that will be grown on the premises, which will, one, just help, I think, the climate and how cool and cold that will stay within. But they'll also be producing food that they'll be eating there in the center. And also they'll be giving this to the community for the local kids and stuff to learn how to grow food and fruit and things like that. So it'll also help the community. And then, I mean, there's an array of things that people can look up, and it'll explain all the different things that the center will be doing. There'll also be composting. I can't think of anything more, but they've actually taken a lot of time to truly build the center in a sustainable way. So this is definitely a step in the right direction. From FIFA, off the top of my head, I can't think of what they're doing, but I know they have a sustainable area within FIFA, so I'm sure that they are doing a lot of things. And again, I'm sure it's pretty easy just to go online and figure it out.
And have you guys started thinking at PSG about how to reduce your carbon footprint when you participate in mega sporting events? Because you mentioned private planes, and I understand how it'd be difficult to travel otherwise, but is it a conversation that you guys are having at the club? And
yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely conversations about how we can offset that and where we can do good in order for this to happen. I think obviously just building our training center is one way to offset this in the amount of fruits and vegetables and reusing of water and things like that. I know that's not a direct way that most people think of carbon offset, but in reality, I think that's a pretty strong start. There's been other discussions. We haven't officialized anything yet, so I can't discuss what, but there's definitely talks, and we definitely understand that that's an issue that we want to address.
And would you say that this is something that a lot of your teammates are also very involved in, or is it more like, are you more of the exception at the club?
A lot. I don't know about a lot. I think what do you think is a lot? 50%, 75%? What is a lot to you? There's definitely more than one other player. There's quite a few players on my team that are aware of the situation and make a conscious effort to change their lifestyles and pay attention to what they're doing and what they're consuming. I think this is an issue, though, that's extremely cultural. I grew up recycling. I grew up where people would come to my school and tell us how important it is that if we drink juice that our mom buys like the really big juices, and then we put it in a refillable, it was plastic at the time, but a refillable plastic cup that we can wash and we can use, rather than having miniature plastic or even the cartons that you're throwing away all the time and the amount of trash that's accumulating. Grew up separating my cans and my glass, and then being really excited to take it to the recycling and get $5 for it, or actually probably get like 10. And my sister and I would get to go to the movies with the money from our recycling, and it was a positive thing that culturally we did a lot. I've lived in Scandinavia, and the way they recycle takes it to a whole new level. They're amazing, and their compost and separating everything. But then I've played in Italy and France, and it's not the same, and it's not the same culture, and there's just not the same teaching about why and how you do it. So those women on my team that aren't doing it yet, I don't think it's necessarily because they don't care. They're just not aware of what should and shouldn't be done yet. And I think PSG in our own training facility, they've also put the different trash cans to recycle and to separate. And I think this has also just kind of entered their head and become a recognition that when they walk over with a piece of trash, they take a minute, they look at what's in their hand, and they place it in the right bin. But I think more education needs to happen on this. And so again, if anybody's listening and they want to talk about working with us, I would love for a big sponsor to come in and really start to do activations to teach the rest of France, and through football as a vehicle and a voice to share how and why we can start doing better as a society.
All right, thank you. Moving on to gender equality in sports and in general, women's football has experienced quite a momentum around the 2019 FIFA World Cup. Mm-hmm. And some newspaper articles and some reports have shown that the COVID-19 pandemic has really kind of like slowed down this momentum and has fragilized the industry of women's football even further than it was before. Could you tell us more about your experience as a women's football player in your team and during the pandemic?
So I kind of disagree with that statement. I think we thought we were on this really cool, like Maverick style wave that was just massive after the Women's World Cup, because everybody was talking about it and everybody was saying how great it was and blah, blah, blah. But it was a lot of talk. And we learned it was a lot of talk because when COVID hit, all of those things that people had claimed and said they were going to do just magically went away. And so I think after the Women's World Cup, it was really easy to say you were on board and stuff. And then COVID hit, and then it actually put a realization, okay, maybe we weren't as high up as we thought. We'd been going in the right direction, but the curve wasn't like this. It was more maybe like this. And so I think COVID in a weird way may have helped women's football, because I think it would have been more detrimental to continue thinking we're building something going like this, when in reality we needed to bring it down quite a few notches and realize that there's still a lot of work to do, and we hadn't made it. And yeah, COVID definitely popped some bubbles, but they were just bubbles filled with empty air. And a lot of people had said stuff that they hadn't backed up, because, you know, after the World Cup, from September to December, January, a few brands had entered the market in different clubs, and not just at PSG, but in other areas around the world. But not as many as you thought would have come from, as much as we thought the Women's World Cup did a great job. There weren't as many French brands jumping on as we thought there should have and would have and could have been after the World Cup. So I think it just kind of shook us back to reality.
And what is your personal experience, just more generally, about sexism and gender inequality in football? And what are some ways you think we could address those inequalities in the future?
I hope one day we can stop using words like inequality and things like that, and just all be people and just all be playing football. And I totally think that we need to have women's football and men's football, because it needs to be designated. I'd love to see if we're the women's Paris Saint-Germain, that they say men's Paris Saint-Germain, and then that would be more balanced, and that would be super cool, rather than this is Paris Saint-Germain, this is women's Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah,
this isn't
agree. Like something that we try to do consistently at IRIS is that when we talk about football, we talk about men's football and women's football. So we talk about the men's World Cup, because as you say, sports matter. And when we talk about sports for women, we mention that it's women's sport, but we don't do the same for men. So, yeah.
No, I mean, I think this would be super important. And I think we can't, I've been in some conversations where people are like, oh, I wish we could just call it football. Okay. In one aspect, yes, I think that'd be great. But then I wouldn't know what I was watching or what was supposed to be on TV. And maybe I'd rather watch the women's game than the men's game. And so I think it's still something, I feel like we need a better word, because to say different, it kind of sounds like one thing is good and one thing is bad. And I don't agree, but just one thing's over here and one thing's over here. They're on the same line. They're different. Like, we're just different. And that's okay. And as women's team, normally we embrace the difference. And there's some things from women's football that's more positive, in my opinion, than from the men's game. But I want to say the men's game, it's not women's football from football in general. That's just weird. But it's so ingrained in us to think like that, that in fact, ironically, I was asking a couple of my players to answer some questions for me. And I was like, in football, who's your favorite players? Who's this, who's that? And a lot of them, because I didn't write women's football, they thought men's football, and they're women's football players. So we have to designate, or you don't know. So I think that's super important. Other things I'd like to see is within the football community, I would like to see, when we say investment in women's football, it's actually an investment to having a plan, to have an organization, to have a structure that in 5 to 10 years, you're actually looking for an ROI. Or in the immediate, you're looking for a return because it's brand awareness, it's positivity. I don't like this idea of just putting money into the women's side and saying it's an investment if you're not trying to invest. Like, investing for me means you have a structure, you have an organization, and you're hoping that something comes out of this. You're hoping that it's building. You're not just designating this amount of money because you have to have a women's team. And I think until we get rid of this mentality that we put money on the side to have a women's team, it's not going to change, and there's not going to be enough buy-in from the top that's actually understanding that there's an advantage to having a women's team. There's going to be a profit. There's going to be brand recognition. There's going to be social acceptance. There's a lot of things that go into it, but just creating a women's team and designating a lot of money to the women's team is not what it needs. Nobody starts a men's team just to start a men's team and throw away money. So why do clubs do that on the women's side? I don't understand.
Thank you. I also hope one day we will stop using the word inequality, but I don't know when that's going to happen. So the last section of this interview is about just activism more generally. So that has been surging for the past 5 years or so. We've seen more athletes speaking out about, well, the environment, but also against racism, for social justice, especially in the United States, but also in Europe and in other places. I was curious to have your opinion on why do you believe there has been a surge in athlete activism in recent years?
I think social media has been a big part of it, and players becoming brands within themselves is huge. Before, you were a part of a team or a club, and they didn't just own your rights, but there wasn't really an outlet for you to speak unless you were a huge, huge player and had, numerous things going on. But because of social media and the emergence of it and how many people are paying attention, you get to have your own page with your own voice and represent yourself. And there's more and more brands that are aligning with players and their beliefs. And I think it's overall just more of a social aspect that you get to be more conscious about what's happening around you and have a voice within it. And there's just more options and more choices. And with that comes the ability to kind of say who you are and what you want to be and where you're going to take that. And so I don't even, and again, like, I think it's just this word with activism. There's a lot of phrases that I kind of find weird. I don't even know if it's activism or it's just like being who you are and opening your voice to say, this is what I believe in. This is what I stand for. This is what I want. And this is what I expect. And I think that's another thing that social media and players, and especially from women, were able to say, I expect you to treat me in a certain way. And if you don't, I'm not going to play there, or I'm not going to represent your brand, or I'm going to let you hear about it on social media. And the millions of people out there are going to know now because I'm able to say it. I don't have to try to find a media outlet who will give me a platform, who will interview me and give me the opportunity to do this. I can do it all by myself. I don't need anybody else's help. I just need a working internet connection and a cell phone, and I can either create amazing things or destroy things at the same time. And so, yeah, I think that's what it is. I think just athletes understanding their brand.
And what do you think is going to be the limit, if any, of athlete activism or just athletes saying their opinions out loud, like in the next 5 or 10 years? How do you think that's going to evolve?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if somewhere some countries actually maybe put into law, just because there's also been a lot of issues, not as much with athletes, in my opinion, but you see stars representing brands because they'll give them a lot of money that the brands might not be up and up or actually selling something that's true. And that person didn't do their due diligence before they signed up. They just saw the zeros and said yes. So I think there might be possibly a few more laws coming into place about how athletes or people and influencers can represent certain things. And I think maybe there'll also be something about responsibility. There's a lot of people, and especially from a financial perspective, if you give them enough money, they'll say whatever you want. Some athletes are truly believe in what they say and are courageous and are stepping up for positive social issues. But other people are kind of just talking or claiming things because there's enough money behind it that they don't care what they're talking about. And I think in some ways it's been detrimental to certain societies or to certain issues. I feel like there's so many people selling things like to take something to get skinnier and all the little girls are seeing it. And then you have an influencer saying that they took this product and probably doesn't work or it could even be unhealthy for these little kids to be seeing this. So I think we might need some limitations on things like that, I don't know, you either have to truly prove that you take the product yourself and you've taken it for 6 months before you're allowed to post it or something like that to prove that it actually does have an effect on you. Yeah, I feel like there's going to be more regulations coming into play.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's this whole new world of the influence, right? Influencers. So sports people, just like musicians and, like TV stars are using their influence to it's a new kind of business. So I think that's definitely something that's going to require regulations in the coming years. All right, so that was my last question. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. We talked about quite a few different topics. Thank you for your time. It was really nice talking to you. Everybody, you guys can check out the GeoSport platform. We have a lot of other content, interviews, papers, and we'll keep on talking about the geopolitical economy of sports in the next videos.
Thank you.